Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we are going to be talking about Love and Monsters, one of the most polarising episodes of Revived 2. And to help with that discourse, we've got double the amount of voices in the room today. We are once again joined by Sam Sweeting,
Hello.
and we are now joined by our second ever guest on the podcast, half of Stale Bread. It's Hadley Steele.
Thank you. I didn't even have to I didn't have to shamelessly self-plug. You just did it for me. Thank you.
We'll get the shameless self plug right at the end of the episode. Don't worry about that.
We support each other on this podcast.
So obviously, Love and Monsters. It's going to be an interesting one to talk about. I've written more notes for this episode than I have any other episode we've discussed in the past. But before we get into it, as is tradition with having a new guest on, our proud one episode history of doing so. Hadley, why don't you talk us through some of your history with Doctor Who?
I did not grow up on Doctor Who. I think I watched a couple of the Tennant episodes as a kid. Pretty much exclusively the Donna Noble era. I think I started watching Doctor Who when I was like 15 to impress a goal. And I stopped after the Capaldi era.
Good.
I really did not like that last series with Bill Potts.
Wow.
I don't know. I was not vibing with it at all.
See, that is my
I also-
favourite of the Capaldi series.
That's too bad. You like Puddle Girl?
Puddle Girl is a odd blip in that otherwise solid story arc.
Yeah,
Okay,
but she's
we're-
hot.
She is hot. My issue was like them bringing back I've forgotten the actor's name, but the master. I thought it was overly advertised, so the twist just had no effect on me.
That's agreed, yeah.
I think also after watching H Bomber Guy's video on Sherlock, I've kind of changed how I feel about media and particularly TV shows.
Sure.
I kind of just I had a switch in my head. Was like, I kind of just don't like Doctor Who. Oh well.
It's a good thing you're here.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
has something changed recently as to why you would volunteer to do a podcast about a show you might not like anymore?
I love negativity. Like, we'll get into it at the end, but like, I review children's books on my channel, and they're just so trash. I love making fun of stuff, man. It's just so much fun.
That's that nervous laugh you're hearing from Fitz is. I think that's the sound of regret, possibly.
I'm a bit of a loose cannon on this podcast. Just a heads up.
No. Look, I do kind of empathize a bit there, Hadley. Yeah, it's a little messed up, but there's something kind of enjoyable, just sort of, I don't know, getting in the zone, I guess, and I mean, not like super enjoyable, and I'm certainly in the past have had my moments where I've sort of ragged on stuff that I haven't liked, even on this podcast. But I just find it funny, and I find your candor very refreshing.
Thank you.
We will give you the chance to do the traditional favourite and least favourite lists if you have them. Specifically, favourite and least favourite Doctor, favourite and least favourite Companion, and favourite and least favourite episode.
Okay, I don't remember enough of Doctor Who to like give something that definitive, but
This
I'll
might
give
have
it a
been
try.
Yeah, I was worried about this when you went into your background.
Most Doctor Who episodes I've only watched once, but I will say my favourite's easily David Tennant. The only classic Who episode I've watched is the one that I watched for the next episode, so I have no opinion on classic Who. My favourite companion is Donna Noble, of course. Easy choice.
Correct.
Favourite episode, I know it's an easy choice, but I'm going to say Blink because it is the best episode.
It's pretty damn good.
Least favourite, let's just make it the one we're talking about today.
Okay, well that's a perfect segue into actually discussing the episode. Love and Monsters. It's certainly a departure episode. It's the first Dr. Light episode of Revival Who. It's something they started to do at around this time to be able to film multiple episodes in a row, or at the same time as each other oftentimes. Blink is a great example of this trope with the Doctor and Martha Belly in it, and it forms an amazing story despite that, and in fact because of that. This one is, like I said at the top of the thing, it's very polarizing. People have either very strong or very negative opinions of it. Would anyone like to stake their claim in either camp before we do a more in-depth discussion?
Yeah. I thought this movie was pretty good. I enjoyed Dylan O'Brien's performance. The robot was played by the mum from Bluey, so that was fun. Uh, it's I don't know why we're talking about it on a Doctor Who podcast.
Okay,
But,
I assume
you
there's
know.
something else called Love and Monsters that's going over my head
Love
at the
that.
moment.
No, Love and Monsters, the 2020 monster comedy film on Netflix starring Dylan O'Brien. That's
Okay.
what we're here to discuss, right?
You've been on the show before, Sam.
Oh no. No, I think we all know that I'm the only person here who's going to be the Love and Monsters defender.
Well, you don't know that necessarily.
I don't know. I've heard you and Fitz talk about it before, and it's
Well,
not
look,
in a favorable light.
in
So
fa-
unless
in
your
fairness-
most recent viewing has changed your opinion.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think for me and Fitz, a lot of this was coming from a place of like remembering having watched it way in the past, and in many cases with Fitz specifically, it can be a case of like I haven't seen it in ages, but I've just heard this about it. Fitz,
Yeah.
now that you have a bit more of a familiarity with the episode, what do you think?
Sorry, you're asking me.
Yes, Sam.
Pardon. Yeah. So yes, you're quite right. It's been a long time since I'd seen it, and a lot of my views were, I guess, skewed by the consensus, I suppose, or what I thought was the consensus. And it's not great. There are definite flaws in it, but it's not that bad. And I find that, like a lot of Doctor Who episodes, I mean, particularly from the classic series, the sum is definitely greater than the whole, but the bits that I like about it, I quite enjoy. And there's even certain risks that they're taking, which they're not really paying off all that well, but I admire the fact that they're taking them. And I think it should also be mentioned that, I think, as you, Sam, have pointed out before, this episode walked so Blink could run. Like, we likely would not have had Blink if this episode hadn't sort of laid the foreground in terms of a Dr. Light story. But yeah, no, there are some definite flaws here, and we'll
Like
get into it.
even as a Love and Monsters defender, I'm not ever going to claim that it's a hidden classic that's overlooked. But I
Sure.
do think it is judged more harshly than it deserves.
Sure.
For what it is, I think it's fine. Like you said, it definitely has problems, but at the end of the day, it's just like a kind of fun new premise or structure for an episode for a show that is ultimately for children.
Hadley, what are your initial thoughts?
This was borderline unwatchable.
Today's going to be a great episode.
Oh,
So I
amazing.
watched this with. So before people accuse me like, oh, you don't like Doctor Who, you don't understand it. I watched this with my partner. My partner fucking loves Doctor Who. They got a Torchwood box set in their room. They hated it too. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the characters. The framing device for the documentary thing was weird and pointless. The monster is ugly. I didn't like the performances. The story was just bizarre, and I didn't relate to the emotions of the characters whatsoever.
This is one of the few times that someone has come into a discussion with a strict and harsh "this is bad" stance. Like, me and Fitz have come into episodes before with like, I mean, it wasn't great, or even sometimes this is rubbish, and we're gonna discuss it out. It seems like you've already it's gonna be great trying to
I mean,
hear the
give it
defenses.
time. I've put my name down for some episodes for similar reasons.
Well, no, that's true. We haven't got to those yet. It's going to be interesting watching. This might legitimately be the biggest disparity of point scores we ever give at the end of one of these.
It's going to be interesting. I would like to say, though, Hadley, on your point about the monster being ugly, and having a bit of a, I don't know, unaesthetic look, and this may be because I'm biased, but just watch other Doctor Who episodes, just even especially the classic series. That's completely, on brand for the show. So I don't know if we could knock the episode that much for it. Having said that, you're not wrong in that the design is it is what it is.
Well, something I'll also
I mean, yeah, it's worth pointing out the design is literally made by a child.
Yeah, it
It's
was
not
the
one for
competition,
one. They
wasn't it?
updated it.
yeah, like the initial design. If you don't know this, there was a Blue Peter competition. I think that kids
Yeah.
could
Yeah,
submit
yeah,
Doctor
yeah.
Who designs for monsters, and the Absorbaloff came from that.
Mm.
That said, even the kid who submitted the design was disappointed by this overall product. primarily
Well, that's
because-
because he wanted it to be 15 feet
Well, yeah,
tall.
but it's not just that. But it's not just that. But it's also because the crew didn't inform the kid that they were making changes to the original design. Like he was fully going through this episode, fully expecting his original creation, and then saw Peter Kay running around in a speedo instead.
Yeah, but that's funny.
And look, I will say this about the design, right? I think even in a more objective sense, it is quite a high concept design. Like, a creature that absorbs other, people and has their faces plastered on its body. The core principle of that idea I think is quite strong. And certainly the body horror element is quite interesting. It's just kind of a shame it's not really used in a massively interesting way. So, as I said, and I'll probably say this a lot with this episode, but it is what it is.
Well, I'll also point out, and I know that this is coming from a place where like Sam and Hadley can't really relate to this experience, but myself and Fitz, the most recent, we're coming off of just yesterday having reviewed the Revival era episode that came before this one, which was The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. So going from Satan himself to Peter Kay running around in a speedo is quite an intense tonal whiplash that we have to deal with, especially if you're watching this week to week.
You're gonna have to do Fear Her. So
That's the real. I mean, Jesus Christ.
that's the real one.
Yeah, I mean, Love and Monsters and Fear Her are often talked about in the same breath as like of worst David Tennant episodes. I think that's primarily because they're like aired back to back. But Fear Her is significantly worse than Love and Monsters, in my opinion.
Yeah, because again, it's been years since I've seen a lot of these episodes, so I barely remember Fear Her, and I know, Cuff, you've talked about how you certainly dislike it and other people dislike it, so I feel compelled to ask, is it really that bad?
Well, I'll put it this way. There was a period of time, I'm going to say, not quite 10 years ago, but close to there, where myself and my sister decided, you know what, we're the only Doctor Who fans in the family, we're going to force the rest of our family to watch it as well. So we sort of took that approach, whereas like every time that we would watch something with dinner, it would be Doctor Who. I think this was also on the heels of like Merlin had just ended, and that was our family watch-along show, so we switched to Doctor Who after that. And even then, like the one episode I distinctly remember all of us not liking was Fear Her. There were other episodes that had sort of like a mix of opinions, but Fear Her was the one where everyone was like, no, this is trash.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but we don't have to talk about that yet. Let's jump over to the timescales to get what the general Doctor Who consensus appears to be for Love and Monsters, and then we'll do a bit more of a deep dive. So, out of 180 votes, this episode has an average rating of 6.
Too high.
Maybe I want to say that's about right, but maybe a shade too high.
Well, something I'll also point out, like I don't normally do this, but this is like one of the few episodes where there's a decent amount of ratings for like 10 all the way down to 1. Like there are some like very disparate views on this. There's a reason why I say this is polarizing. Like the first review that's got any text on it is a 2 out of 10. Then there's a 3, 7 right there, 8, 9, 6. Like this is something where people can just see whatever they want to in it, really.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say, like, if I was trying to be more objective about it, I think a 6 is fair. But if I'm going purely off personal enjoyment, I'd say it's probably closer to a 7.
Well,
Maybe even 7.5.
this is also apparently considered the 6th worst Tennant episode. Wait, 6th worst? Yeah, no, 7th worst. 7th worst David Tennant episode.
I feel like I can think of like 5 episodes from season 3 alone that I think are worse.
There are
than this
only 2 stories in season 3 that rank below Love and Monsters. Those are Lazarus Experiment and Daleks in Manhattan.
I'm talking about those ones too.
Well, eventually.
So excited.
Have you just jumped on to any
I want
episode
to
that has a
meet the
bad opinion?
person that thinks that Love and Monsters is worse than 42, and just say like, why?
Well, to be fair, 42 isn't
going on?
42 isn't much higher. There's like in terms of like worst to best, it goes Love and Monsters, The Doctor's Daughter, 42. Like it's not far off.
The Doctor's really?
Yeah, apparently. I mean, that is like arguably the worst episode of series 4, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, but like that's because practically everything in season 4 is great.
Yeah, I agree.
Season 4 was pretty good, even from memory.
So, getting into specifics, this has a 5.6 for plot.
What?
Yeah, I mean,
mean-
it's kind of like a slice of life kind of story. So you can't.
Yeah, it's a bit
really-
looser.
Yeah,
It's a. I think one of the things I like about it is that it's this. It's like it's the thing you always like bringing up, Cuff. The idea of like what the Doctor leaves behind, where
Yes.
this is like a step. This is a step further than that. It's like what the Doctor causes just by like walking past and not even noticing. You know, and but then it becomes this sort of like found family thing and ends in like this sort of bittersweet tragedy. It's like I think there's more merit to that than a lot of people are willing to give it credit.
I agree, actually, and I quite liked the bits of dialogue from Elton in the end. I found them quite emotionally stirring.
Looks like we've got a 6.3 for acting as well. I mean, no one's giving an amazing performance, but I think that for the most part, the performances are solid. I vastly prefer Peter Kay's performance as Victor Kennedy as opposed to the Absorbaloff himself. I think he's a bit miscast for the Absorbaloff.
They're both not amazing. The
No.
Absorbaloff is just fat bastard from Austin Powers. So
No, he's
not appreciating that.
He's northern. He's not Scottish.
eh.
That's just Peter Kay's normal voice.
Oh Jesus! Like, he's just like, "Oh, come in. I want to have a chat with you," and then he eats him.
Oh,
He's just a really bizarre little man with a fist for a cane that he definitely just uses to walk around with. It's definitely nothing sexual.
I didn't expect that to be.
Yeah, look, the performances, they're fine enough for what they're trying to do. And you know, what's his name? Peter Kay, is that his name?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he, you know, he does, especially as Absorbaloff, does come, I think, from the great tradition of, you know, sort of over-the-top Doctor Who villains. You know, again, maybe my bias is coming in there, but it doesn't bother me terribly, but I can definitely understand why his performance, especially as the Absorbaloff, would be really annoying to somebody.
Well, because like Peter Kay is like he's considered one of the greatest stand-up comedians in Britain. Like
Yeah.
he holds the Guinness record for selling out a comedy tour in like less than an hour.
Wow.
And like I would say, to use a more recent example, Lee Mack is an incredibly funny comedian and comedic actor. But if you went off his performance in Kablam, you'd be like, man, who fucking gives a shit about this guy? He's giving a terrible performance. So like I will say, I don't think the script necessarily utilizes Peter Kay as well as it should.
It's certainly not Peter Kay's
But
fault.
even with what little he's given, I think he gets a lot of humor out. More
I have no
so
opinion.
more so as Victor Kennedy than the Absorbaloff, yeah. But he spends most of the episode in that persona anyway, so
Yeah, I have no opinion on like the actors as a whole. However, I will say the actress that plays Ursula plays Babu Frick in Star Wars, and that was a fun
that's true.
little thing I looked up. I hate Rise of Skywalker, but Babu Frick has a special place in my heart.
Is that the general
One-
consensus, or do most people despise Babu Frick as well?
I don't know, actually. I don't think
I
people
mean-
really talk about him.
I don't know. I
He
just
was in The Mandalorian season 3.
really.
I thought that was
He
just like a
called- he
generic
called Grog-
alien of that kind.
I mean, well, yeah, because there were more than one, but I think one of them was supposed to be Babu Frick. I just don't think the dialogue ever explicitly pointed at him and said that one is Babu Frick.
Right.
It was still Shirley Henderson doing the voice for them, at least. So,
That's cool.
What a resume.
Mm.
5.3 for effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind the effects. It's like
The-
one of the few things I liked in this episode.
There weren't really that many
No,
effects
yeah.
to begin with. It was really only Ursula getting sucked in and
Melting
The
to
the
the
couple
concrete.
of the couple of times when you didn't have close-ups on the faces on the Absorbaloff, and everything else was practical.
Yeah.
I really
And
liked
even
the
then,
reveal.
the practical was just the Absorbaloff costume.
And the
I
alien
really
at the
liked-
beginning.
I really like the reveal of one of them being on his ass.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the dumbest elements, but anyway.
I was being sarcastic. Jesus.
Oh, pardon me.
I wasn't. It's dumb as hell, but it's funny.
It's a very mid 2000s joke to make.
Oh, yes, it's... Yeah.
Like, what? Because I think, like, unironically, I think that kind of fits with the tone of this episode.
Yeah,
Well,
a little bit.
you say that it fits with parts of the tone of this episode.
Yeah, like it definitely goes up and down, and there's bits of more serious stuff. I guess we'll get to those later.
One of the characters' daughter is a junkie, and there's like a full-on scene of just her breaking down. I'm like, what am I supposed to take away from this episode?
Look,
We've
I
got
was...
the Absorbaloff like farting and gassing, and just like, oh, I'm taking all my fucking people. I'm coming. And then it's like, oh, my daughter's taking drugs. Oh god.
Oh dear. I admit that bit annoyed me a little bit as well, in the sense that I wanted, like, you want that expanded upon, yeah, because that's really serious. The daughter being a drug addict thing. So I'm thinking, yeah, well, why aren't we getting closure for that? And then I thought, well, maybe it's trying to say, you know, sometimes unfortunately that's how life goes for some people. You don't get to know the ending to every story. But if that was the case, they should have expanded on that thematically.
Well, it's part of what this episode does best, which is like just the slice of life, the found family kind of aspect of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would
like
be annoyed.
the point isn't that you see all these characters like get resolutions or anything. It's that you see them start to open up to each other and become this found family, and then inevitably it all gets fucked up.
It would have been nice if everything got
like
fucked
that
up
sort
by...
of tragedy to
I mean, it would have been nice if everything got fucked up by a more tonally consistent threat than the Absorbaloff, but...
Yeah, it was...
I mean, sure. But
a little bit.
It was really weird, just like, he comes in, he's like, hey, you guys want to stop having fun and hunt the doctor for me? No one questions it. There's no, like, moment of conflict. They just do it.
Yeah, that was pretty... Like, the change was, like, with the tone, but also with the plot trajectory was quite sharp. Because I don't even... Like, slice of life stuff, that's not something you normally find in Doctor Who. But it was handling it pretty well, and I honestly kind of wanted to see more of an expansion. I really like the cute little montage of when they get in the band together. It's, I don't know, there's something kind of endearing about that. So it was a little odd.
I did appreciate Electric Light Orchestra. Their inclusion of Turn to Stone, one of my favourite Electric Light Orchestras. A lot of people don't know it, so I was very happy to see that come in. I was like, it gets a little positive for me for that.
Oh. I didn't know you were capable rather of giving positive feedback to media.
Yeah, no, I definitely... the unfortunate thing with Cuff and our relationship is
come
I
on.
like to dunk on the things he likes. That's just my thing. I do apologise.
I didn't even say I like Love and Monsters. It's just bringing past trauma into this.
You said that I was talking about... You're like, oh yeah, you always talk about like negativity around media. I didn't realise you could like something.
I was
Like,
referring to that purely isolated to what the casual viewer would have heard from this podcast so far.
I like things. I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I thought Mario was okay.
We can talk about this off camera. or off mic, I should say. So it has a 5.8 for replay value. I think in the sense that it's one of those episodes where if you haven't watched it for a while, it's something where it's like, do I still think the same thing? Because I think my opinion on this episode has changed maybe 3 or 4 times across the decade that I've been watching Doctor Who. But, like, once you know what you like about it, I don't think you're going to discover much else on a rewatch, so I don't know.
I've had this experience a lot with the stuff I've already covered, but the bad stuff, that stuff certainly didn't get any better on a second watch, but the bits that I liked about it, I liked a little bit more, or appreciated a little bit more on the second watch. Like I said, that final little sort of monologue bit with Elton, I appreciate that more now than when I first watched it, because I've watched it twice this week.
Yeah, I think in isolation that scene's good. The problem is, like, there's a lot of emotional context to that scene, and I just didn't connect with any of the context.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that.
And finally, 9 out of 106 people say the story requires a previous. I mean, they kind of montage through season 1 of the show at the beginning, so I guess that catches you up on what you missed. But at the same time, what would you think of Doctor Who if this was your first episode?
I would think, why is this called Doctor Who?
It's true.
It's barely in it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like with I've seen a lot of times people suggest, like, if someone's never seen Doctor Who, show them Blink. It's an amazing introduction to the show, and honestly,
it's not.
Well, I mean,
it's a terrible introduction to the show.
Well, is it? Because it kind of like you learn about the Doctor at the same time that Sally Sparrow does, right? Like, it's, you know, like when the first time she goes in, like, we see a character enter the TARDIS for the first time in that episode, and in that moment, the viewer, you learn about the bigger on the inside shtick. You don't really get that from this episode. Like, I think Blink does a better job as a standalone of, like, hitting, like, the things you need to know about the show beats. Whereas with this episode, like, the whole point of it is the mystery.
If you had to pick between this one or Blink, then yeah, Blink is a better introduction. But, like, I still think any like actual introductory episode that actually includes the Doctor as a character for more than 2 minutes.
I agree with that.
It's always going to be a better one.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, you do get I think a decent impression of who the Doctor is in Blink because of the way he's framed in the narrative and the way he sort of impacts the world of the story. But at the same time, yeah, I think, Sam, you're probably right. Like, there would have to be certainly other better introductory episodes. Just because Blink is a great episode doesn't necessarily mean you should use it to introduce any new Who fans. I will say, though, because of the way the Doctor's framed in the narrative of Blink, it does kind of make it more intriguing, so maybe new fans will think, oh, who is this Doctor guy? I want to learn more about him. So.
Oh yeah, like I could see, like, the case for the argument. I just don't think it, like, holds up as well as people want it to.
Sure.
I guess is the best way I can phrase it.
I'm
like,
always going
I feel
to...
like, regardless of your feelings on, like, whether or not Rose is a better episode than Blink, Rose kind of does the same thing of, like, drip feeding you the Doctor until eventually properly introducing the concepts.
I'm always going to be a champion for any first episode of a new showrunner is a good jumping on point.
Yeah.
I suppose we've already started a bit, but now that we're free of the timescales, we can jump into a more extensive conversation about it. Something that I'll start with, and it's something that I thought as the episode was going on, is I wish this story was more like Turn Left. Like, I think it would have been interesting to explore what a everyday person in this world would perceive about all of the bizarre alien antics that have been going on. Like,
well, that's one of the things I like about it. So yeah, I would have liked to see more of that.
Well, it brushes through, like I said, it brushes through a season of series 1 of the show in like a minute and a half at most. I think it would have been, like, interesting to watch that sort of take place over the full 45 minutes, and you could even, like, have people go, like, they touch on what Rose, World War III, and Christmas Invasion. But there could have been, they could have gone, oh, did you hear about the freak lightning storm in Cardiff and the massive earthquakes that were happening? You know, that could have been something that they were they could have brought up if they had devoted more time to that idea. Because it is a question that you oftentimes have with these like sci-fi and fantasy worlds, with the question of what does Joe Q Citizen think is going on?
Who's Joe?
He lives down the road.
Those scenes reminded me of that Jack Black episode of Community, where they just have the scenes from older episodes and it just randomly cuts to Jack Black doing some random shit.
A little bit, yeah. But that was my No, go on, Hadley.
So this is a different tangent, so feel
Sure.
free to finish this one off if you wanted to.
Okay, I will then, before you jump into that. But that was my biggest complaint with the episode, is that I wish it would, like, commit to a hook or a format. Because as it was going on, like, you know, I found that, like, it was trying to be, like, 3 different stories, right? It was trying to be, like, this found footage thing of, like, Elton recounting his, like, experience with the Doctor and surrounding worlds. It was trying to be a thing of, like, how everyday Londoners perceive the world of Doctor Who. And it was also trying to be this absorbal of trying to absorb everyone, including the Doctor thing. Whereas, like, I think any of those things would have worked better if they weren't shackled by the other 3. You know, because if they...
Especially the absorbable off plot.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if they... I was thinking, like, because it only really used found footage whenever Elton was a talking head, and, like, once when Ursula's filming him on the street. But, like, imagine if the whole episode was in that style, and rather than, like, cutting to professional quality footage of Elton reacting to all the stuff that's happening, you instead get this, like, clumsy amateur footage of Linda, like, recreating the events, like, in found footage documentary style. That would have been, like... That would have gone, like, also the extra mile to, like, firmly establishing Linda as this tight-knit group, which I think... And it would have just been charming in general.
There was a... I don't expect any of you have seen it, but there was a Sci-Fi Channel show from, like, early 2010s called Sanctuary, and in the first season there is an episode that's about because basically the Sanctuary is like a secret organization devoted to finding, housing, and keeping cryptids safe from the rest of the world, basically, and the rest of the world safe from them. So the episode is entirely from the perspective of a news reporter's camera as they've snuck into a building and found the Sanctuary team trying to, like, deal with the fact that there's this monster loose in, I want to say it's like a warehouse or something, I can't remember. But, like, the whole episode is from the perspective of that camera, except for, like, the very, very end of it, after the whole thing's been resolved, and they're, like, watching the tape back.
Well, it's...
So, like, yeah, like, that kind of thing could work for this sort of premise.
Well, the interesting thing is, like, maybe they thought, like, they could have done that, but maybe they thought, oh, found footage is a bit of a, you know, old hat by now, maybe we shouldn't do it. But the thing is, the Blair Witch Project had come out 7 years before this, and movies like Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, and even the freaky Spanish zombie movie Wreck hadn't come out yet. So you think it's kind of a shame they didn't go for something like that. That could have been really sort of breaking up the formula.
Yeah, there could have been an innovator.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, like, it's not a horror.
No, yeah.
All those other things are horror stories. This is just... It's more like a found footage mystery, if anything.
Yes, that's true. I mean, like, Cloverfield, that's probably the closest, like, sci-fi horror, but yeah, but that's still more horror than sci-fi, I would say. So, yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'm going to get into my tangent, so...
Sure.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't recommend rewatching this episode, but if you do, it's something to think on, because you can't unsee it. This episode's weirdly blue. There's the obvious thing of the TARDIS being blue, but also there's the song Mr. Blue Sky, which gets played 3 times in this episode.
Yeah.
there's the opening where there's a bunch of blue doors that Elton runs past, and then Rose throws a blue bucket of whatever on the alien, and David Tennant's like, "Not the blue one! I told you, not the blue one!" And there's a lot of like background objects and scenes that are just blue, and there's like a scene of Elton in a blue jacket and blue jeans, and I started getting really paranoid. Like, what is going on here?
I mean, blue jeans. When have you ever seen those before?
I'm glad you
You
mentioned.
wonder.
I'm glad you mentioned the blue bucket thing, because that was like just something funny I pointed out. Like it's normally I go through a revival episode being like, and let's tally up and see how good Rose was in this. Normally not so.
I was going to say, you probably loved this episode. Rose was barely in it.
She was, but then the one thing she did in the episode was get blue confused with not blue, so it's still not a great showing.
There's a Scooby-Doo dog gag at the start of the episode.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was gonna say, God, that
Scooby-Doo.
annoyed me.
I mean, yeah, it's another. It's a weird choice because for a lot of the start of the episode, it's played very naturally and like a sense of realism, especially with Elton talking to camera. But then it becomes a cartoon for like 30 seconds or so.
That was so silly. Like, I'm used to Doctor Who
I
being
don't know.
kind of
I
goofy,
feel
but
like from the moment the Doctor actually shows up and like has the meet and he's like, here boy, that's the point where like everything becomes a cartoon for a little bit.
Sure.
I mean,
Until the Doctor's like, hang on, don't I know you? And then all of a sudden it just gets back to like being serious. I don't know. I'm just because my thing is like this is a silly episode of a show that's for children, so like I don't mind that it does some silly cartoony shit sometimes. But at the same time, it kind of worked for me in a way where it's so disorienting, and that's kind of what Elton would be feeling in that moment.
I would like that if that was
I
the whole
guess.
episode, but the problem is we've also got a junkie daughter and a dead mum subplot that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean
yeah,
that's the thing.
neither of
like,
which really get expanded upon that much.
well, especially the dead mum stuff, because that's like when it gets to that last 5 minutes is when the episode really kind of starts to massively fall apart for me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, like even I will admit that's super tacked on.
Well, especially
There
because
was a
like,
shadow in your house. I had to get rid of it.
yeah, I mean, putting aside the fact that this episode like potentially introduces the Vashon Narada 2 years before Moffat
I was gonna
would.
say, it's
But also, but also,
So
like,
imagine if like the shot is just like, oh,
skeleton.
that was the night my mom died. It just pans down to a fucking completely bone dry skeleton.
oh man.
but like, if there had been any kind of foreshadowing before that, like when Elton like, because that he doesn't talk about his childhood in any way. We have no like clue beforehand that he had an absent mother. Like, there's a hint that he maybe blocked out the moment that he sees his dead mum, but
Yeah.
does that mean that he, like, blocked out the memory of his mother altogether? That seems a bit overkill. Like, he never once mentions that she went missing at any point. It's just sort of like the episode is like, well, Elton needs to have a connection to the Doctor from the past, so we put him in his house, and then Russell T Davies got to the end of the script and went, wait, why was he there? I don't know, what's something tragic I can throw in? Dead mom, why not?
Yeah.
And then we're going to have
Got
some really
eaten by a
melodramatic
shadow.
shots of the mother, like, walking Elton out onto a football field and then walking off without him, like, fading from memory kind of thing. I get the metaphor of what they're trying to do, but when you consider that a lot of the episode is, like, the found footage realism thing, it leaves you wondering, well, for a moment at least, well, did this actually happen, or is this just a visual representation of someone dying? It's weirdly misplaced and totally
Yeah.
wrong, I think.
It is, and because that's what I thought. I thought it was like in like an in-universe thing because the like when they're using the film grain, like you can kind of tell what they're trying to evoke there. So yeah, that was a bit confusing to me too. And at the very least, yeah, it's very tacked on, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah, I guess...
Oh, actually, I have a tangent.
Okay, go ahead.
Yay.
So we all know and love that the Absorbeloff's home planet is called Clum.
I'm bold of you to assume that, but go on.
Well, I don't see how anyone could not love the fact that his home planet is called Clum. But anyway, so this is like such a weird niche, but like recently like a Facebook Doctor Who shitposting group like just changed its name to Clum. Like not Doctor Who Clum posting,
Just
just
Clum.
Clum.
They're all absorbable.
But then another layer on that is that formerly Star Wars Sith posting has been doing this thing where like every month it just changes its name to some other weird shit that has nothing to do with Star Wars. So there was a period where someone was like, the Doctor Who group is called Clum. We should also be called Clum.
Oh no.
So there was a period where both the Doctor Who and the Star Wars shitposting groups were just called Clum, and you just had to kind of figure out which one was which.
I assume
I'm
the
willing-
picture of
I'm
the
willing
group.
to bet that there was. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm willing to bet that there were people who were in both groups who would intentionally
absolutely,
post
yeah.
ambiguous memes that could be referring to either franchise.
Yeah, there were a bunch of like Star Wars, Doctor Who, Clum spin-off
Any
crossovers.
Ursula Barbie Frick action?
I don't believe so.
Did this
Not that I
pre
saw.
did this predate Babu Frick or?
No, this was only like a couple of months ago.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh dear. See, people do remember this episode. Well,
Well, the Clom is also name dropped in late series 4. It's one of the planets that
Yeah.
disappears from the sky. That
Really?
The
Who'd
Dalek
want
seems
to
to
steal
fall.
Clum?
Yeah, the Doctor's literally like, Clom's gone. Who'd want Clom? As if that's not an entire planet and civilization.
Yeah, but like an entire planet and civilization of Absorbalofts.
Well, that's what I was going to discuss, actually. Well, is it? Is it an entire planet of Absorbalofts, or is he using science
Well, yeah,
to
he
absorb?
gets the name Absorbaloft from Elton.
Well, but also,
It's like, oh yeah, I like that one.
Well, this episode seems to imply that the Absorbaloff, without his cane, will just, melt and absorb into anything. So, like, is his entire species like that? When they're born, are they born with the little machine that helps them stabilize? Because, like, how the hell did that evolve?
My assumption would be that if that species exists, then there is some property on their home planet that means that's not a problem for them, and they would only need a device like the cane if they were going to another planet, such as Earth.
My theory is the writers didn't put any thought into it.
That's also very possible.
No,
That is-
definitely. And a lot of the Absorbaloff finale really feels like Russell T Davies had this story about Linda and their antics and their family, and then was like, and also I'll insert whatever villain gets chosen by the Blue Peter thing here, because like Jesus Christ, like the Absorbaloff is a nice idea if it had been written into a story that he fit in.
yeah. Like I
Yeah.
said, high concept design. You could have done something with it, but it's like RTD. Like I think knew how goofy it was going to turn out, so he just sort of steered into the skid. Incidentally, I just want to touch on something about RTD here. First off, as we've discussed, the writing in this story, not great. There's one element that really annoyed me. It's when, basically any moment that, Victor keeps talking about the eczema. And the reason why that annoyed me, it's not because of how goofy the line is. It's the fact that he keeps saying it, because that's just a classic instance, in my view, of something that could be shown rather than told. I don't want to keep hearing like, "Oh, keep back, go away from me, don't touch me. Got the eczema." Surely, couldn't have they shown that? Could they have maybe, even as a gag, given him like a, like those little grubby claw things, sort of older short people use to get things off the shelves. Couldn't they use that? I mean, don't get me wrong, that's still goofy as shit, but it still would have been better than what we got. It's just like,
don't know,
it's mentioned like
'cause
4 times.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's like I can't touch people because then I will absorb them. But like, I don't think you can. I don't know. I feel like you've got Peter Kay saying a funny word in the wrong way, and like that's enough of a gag for that.
I just
Maybe it's repeated a few too many times, but like he's obviously supposed to be like a prim and proper, high status type of character. So I feel like it would diminish him even more so to have him then like show that he has skin problems
I
or have to
mm,
do this other shit to circumvent it.
I guess so. I mean, like that in itself, like the way he mispronounces the word, that's indicating to us that there's something not quite right about this guy. What's that about? I just wish there could have been a more nuanced way of doing that, because just on principle, when I see that in writing, it just sort of annoys me. Also, I have a slight theory I'm going to toss out here for you folks. Um, would you say that RTD is a better showrunner than he is a scriptwriter?
Did he
Ooh,
write this one?
That's a good question, because I don't think... Was that Hadley?
Did he write this one?
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
I mean, if this is like a statement of what his writing quality is like, yeah, I guess he is.
I mean, it's
I mean, yeah.
demonstrably not.
What are like? What are some other examples of episodes he's
Well,
written?
I've got like a list of the ratings that we've given episodes in the past, and like I think for a while we were like, well, what's gonna happen with like, because I have a look. Yeah, Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways is the only RTD story that we've reviewed on the podcast that has gotten higher than a 7.
And those were great stories, but I think even you said, Cuff, that like certainly before we got to that point.
And Tooth and Claw.
No, did RTD write that?
I think so, because that has a heavy. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't. I was just thinking because that episode has a big Torchwood thing at the end, and it ties into the like final story. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did, but I'll double check because I was fairly
I don't think he
certain
did.
it was. Ba, 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 ba. So look. No, it was. It was.
Oh, it was. Okay, cool. But yeah, I wonder, like he's even up to now, the stories that he's written, he's had more misses than hits. Well, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't call them misses, but they're
I don't know. Yeah, I would say maybe yes, I would agree he's a better showrunner than scriptwriter, but that doesn't necessarily follow that he is a bad scriptwriter.
no, certainly not. Yeah, it's just
Because flip side, Stephen Moffat is a better scriptwriter than he is showrunner, and that does follow he's a bad showrunner.
that is absolutely true.
And I was gonna argue that Chibnall is the same, but like,
No, he's just bad at both.
well, no, because like he wrote quite a few episodes when he wasn't showrunner that were good. He wrote a handful that weren't, but like it's not like a hard and fast rule that he just actively can't write a Doctor Who episode. He has
No,
written good stuff before.
I would say any episodes he wrote while he was show running.
No, they were bad.
Oh yeah,
ooh, they were bad.
yeah, no, they were bad. But I might argue the same thing with Stephen Moffat, but that's a whole other situation. So
Well, getting back onto Love and Monsters real quick, I just had a thought. Normally, when we have a story about an alien who is disguised as a human in order to get some kind of subterfuge, and then they reveal themselves in the third act, we normally get some kind of reveal as to how they were able to be in disguise, right? Like the Slovene have the zippers in their head, that kind of stuff. With the Absorbaloff, it's just like he just appears as the Absorbaloff towards the back half of the back end of the story, and there's no real indication of how the Victor Kennedy disguise was a thing.
yeah, because there's no transformation sequence. I mean, maybe
We don't
maybe
see the Victor Kennedy skin lying around anywhere.
yeah, like maybe there's an implication that because Clom is meant to be like a mirror planet to Raxacoricophalopatorius, that maybe they're using similar like compression field technology, but it's certainly never explained.
No.
Maybe he
My
absorbed his skin.
assumption, my assumption was just that because he's absorbing humans, he can use that to disguise himself as one.
Yeah, I guess that
Maybe.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's not terribly clear though if that is
No.
the case.
No, like we've said, the inclusion of the Absorbaloff just as a creature and a concept, it feels a bit rushed in that ending.
I would concede, I think Victor Kennedy would probably be more interesting if he was just Victor Kennedy.
Well, yeah.
yeah, or if he had like some sort of, like sort of similar motives to the rest of Linda, but like more selfish, I guess, or more
Yeah,
flawed.
it has to be for nefarious purposes that he
Well, yeah.
wants to
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
find the Doctor, like whatever that
Mm,
may be. Where it's just like, I just want to steal the TARDIS, or I want to get his
mm.
alien DNA for immortality, or some dumb shit like that.
Mm.
But I mean, that's essentially what the Absorbaloff
Well,
wanted,
sure,
but
yeah.
just
Or maybe
by
even,
absorbing.
maybe even revenge. Maybe the Doctor made a mistake in his past, and
Uh,
Victor Kennedy could want to get after him
the
for that
Doctor threw a
reason.
bagel and it hit him in the head or something.
And like, but that would even tie in with the end, right? Because there's that kind of the bit where Elton sort of talks about how great the Doctor is, but also how dangerous it is, sort of being associated with the Doctor, and how almost kind of frightening he is. And it I enjoy that, and that tracks with my sort of uh, interest in elements of the Doctor's characterization that sort of puncture the mythologizing or over mythologizing of them. Particularly as more of a sort of savior character, but yeah, like if they could have married that element with Victor Kennedy's character, if he was somebody who felt that he was wronged by the Doctor in some grievous way, but that's not quite what we got. So, oh well.
On the topic of Russell T Davies being a good showrunner, I don't know who else picked up on it, but there's a Harold Saxon reference in this story.
Is there?
Yeah.
I don't think I
Because
picked it up.
I noticed he mentioned Torchwood when he got all the files out.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't notice
Saxon's name is on the newspaper that the Absorbaloff is initially using to hide his appearance.
Ah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so I always assumed that the first Harold Saxon reference was in Runaway Bride, but nope, it's here.
Nice. It's not in. Yeah, it's not in any other
time
earlier.
as we find an even earlier one.
I dare say we would have spotted it in our watches
Yeah,
back
that's right.
of the rest of this season.
Something we haven't talked about at all so far is the Jackie Tyler
Well,
stuff.
that was going to be the next topic of conversation, because this is like really the only time that we get any like glimpse of Jackie Tyler outside of the Doctor and Rose.
I think this is Jackie Tyler's best episode.
Well, I was going to say that actually. Yeah, I really
because I can't
like
think
her
of any other
characterization.
ones better.
Well, it's also just great to see like how far Jackie has come, especially from something like Aliens in London, where she's calling the authorities to report the Doctor's presence, but now she's gained such a trust in him that she's like, I know you're here about the Doctor, and as a result, I don't trust you anymore because I'm keeping them safe. But also a lot of comedic antics with Elton prior to that, where he's going through, all right, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and Jackie initiates all of them.
Yeah, that bit, it's an interesting subversion, that obviously keeps the pace brisk, and I think in other instances it's something like that seems a little bit on the nose, almost meta in a way, would annoy me, but here it oddly works. It's one of the experiments in this
Jackie's
episode that I kind of admire.
It fits Jackie's character really well as well.
Yes, that's also true.
But then also,
or even like just before that, where he's like, I have to find this one random girl in the entirety of London, and immediately cuts to, oh, that's Rose. She lives down the road with her mum. Blah, blah, blah.
It's certainly a nice way to cut to the action.
Yeah.
But it's
Let's
nice
just assume he was wandering the town for like hours.
Well, that's also potential.
That's true. That is true.
But I also quite enjoy the turn that Jackie has from like overt flirtation with Elton and being like, there's not that much wine on my shirt, and then splashing on more. But then the hard turn to, I've just had a call from Rose. I'm actually quite sad. This was a mistake. But then also the flip from Elton in that moment to be like, you know what, I agree. I'm abandoning the mission. You just need a friend right now. It's a really really great exchange. It's sadly ruined by a case of dramatic misunderstanding halfway along. Well, it's not that much misunderstanding, but like if Jackie,
I was gonna say she's right.
I know she's right, but I always hate it when when conflict in a show is progressed by, I was initially doing this, but now I've changed, and we know they've changed, but then the characters are like, no, get out! I don't want to see you anymore, and it leads to
it's not even
the
that
moment.
the conflict.
Well, no,
it's not even that
not
the conflict is progressing. The subplot's completely dropped after that.
Well, yes, but it does lead to when Rose steps out of the TARDIS at the end and completely ignores the fact that many people have died and someone's about to die, and just goes, "You upset my mum," which is again a further thing of that whole trope that I hate. Yeah, I don't know.
Is the trope Rose?
Rose Tyler, everyone.
Well, okay, look. Yeah. I can't win. It's
alright, you've only got like 4 episodes with her left.
Well, yeah, but then when she appears in Series 4, she still hasn't changed and she's still horrible there as well.
Oh no, she's bad in Season 4, but like here she's fine.
Is she bad in Season 4? It's been years since I've seen it, so...
I don't like that, like, she turns into this, like, pseudo-messiah, like,
well, my thing is...
super competent thing.
My thing with Rose is
character.
that in the finale, Rose is shown to be incredibly jealous that Martha as a character exists. And is just like, I was here first, and, well, fuck off. Anyway, the Jackie stuff is all pretty good in this. And I think something we haven't actually talked about yet, Elton as a character, I quite like him in this. Like, he's no Sally Sparrow, but in terms of characters that we follow for a single Dr. Light episode and then never see again, he's likable enough.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting. Again, I think for me that ending is his strongest, characterization. I mean that makes sense. It's the end, but he does what he needs to do well enough, and just sort of watching him sort of go through the motions of how to emotionally process everything, because there's a lot of pretty wacky shit that's just been thrown at him. It's pretty entertaining, I thought.
Speaking of the ending.
Okay, we've been dancing around this.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
We've been dancing around this issue for basically an hour now. And yes, after all that happens in this episode, the tonal shift of the Absorbaloff, the tonal shift of Elton's mother being dead, the final minute of this episode gives us one last intense tonal shift, and I would be hard-pressed to imagine that you'll argue for this in the positive light, Sam.
I think it's funny.
I don't. I think it's horrifying.
It's really stupid and funny. That's my opinion of this whole episode. It's really stupid but funny.
So, for everyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, after the Absorbaloff sinks into the ground and becomes nothing, the Doctor, for some reason, decides, I know what'll make this situation better. I'll reconstitute part of the Absorbaloff's last victim and make them a concrete slab for eternity. That's not good.
I love the line of Elton, get a spade.
Look, it's so remarkably out of character for the Doctor to do that. The episode frames it like a happy ending. It demonstrably isn't. Life as just a face in a concrete slab sounds like hell.
It reminds me of the ending of the next
They have
episode
a
we're talking
functioning
about.
sex life.
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, they imply that there's a love life.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the connective tissue between the 2 episodes we're talking about is immortal faces in concrete slabs.
This episode frames it like it's a good thing, and the 5 Doctors is correct.
I have a question, because her face is on a concrete slab. How far does that throat go?
Look,
It's bigger on the inside.
I don't want to talk about this for longer than we need to.
Oh, come on.
You got me. You got me with that one, sweetie. You got me good.
Oh dear.
It's rough, and Fitz, I've been teasing this for a while. No, not teasing, but I've been telling you that about this ending and how inconsistent it is with the Doctor's general worldview for a while now. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of do. So I have a couple of things to say about it. One, this is a smaller element, but I don't know whether it's because I was just mixing this up with the Idiot's Lantern, but I honest to God thought the way it ended was like they got both Ursula's body and face back, but for some reasons, for some weird sci-fi, timey-wimey magic reason, her face had to stay on the concrete and her body was just faceless forever. I don't know why I thought
Christ!
Sex Life is even more functional, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's what I
Pop
thought.
up the slab in the corner so she can watch.
Oh, Jesus.
Does that count as cucking? If you're watching yourself have sex with your husband.
Oh, this is what happens when you don't think through the writing, Russell.
I mean, it opens up to new forms of masturbation as well. Elton, lower my concrete slab down a bit, and I'll finish myself off.
60-90's got to be interesting.
You were saying, Fitz?
Yeah. So that was a misconception I had about it. And the thing is, given how dark and grim it is, there's almost a part of me that wants to say, oh, but that kind of ties in with that ending theme of saying, yeah, maybe the Doctor's not all that great. And I know that I'm a little biased there because I like that characterization of the Doctor for reasons which I've sort of already gone over on this podcast. But it is a bit odd, and the way it's being framed in the narrative, it is meant to be kind of passed off as a bit of a joke, but yeah, it's kind of weird and shitty and depressing a little bit. It's very interesting that, again, we'll be talking about in the next episode, immortality, put in a concrete slab, but it's objectively framed like immortality is like a bad thing in the Five Doctors, but here it's like, well, I guess at least, what did she say? Like, she said, I guess I'm
age.
Yeah, at least I'll never age. I don't know. It is what it is, as I've said throughout this episode. It just... It could be worse, I guess. It certainly could bother me worse, but yeah, like, certainly, now that you pointed it out, it's not great. And I think, because the way you framed it, and I think I even talked to you about this, the way you were talking about it, I assumed there was something where the Doctor, like, definitively could have done something to, completely save her, but he just didn't. But it's a bit more, like, that's the best he could do, but then you think, well, did it have to be the best he could do? Was there some other way that RTD could have written this to have a better ending?
I just think that the character of the Doctor that we know would 100% think this is worse than death, and I'm not going to subject someone to this.
Yeah, I mean...
Because the Doctor intrinsically knows the value of a life, and knows, like, because he has a similar mindset with Cassandra, right? Like, he's essentially subjected Ursula to Cassandra's life against her will, and the Doctor in The End of the World is definitively like, Cassandra, everything has its time and everything dies.
Yeah,
it's not great characterization from the Doctor, and it's one of the only moments of characterization that the Doctor gets in this episode. So once again, if this is your first episode of the show, yeesh.
Yeah,
What's
it's
worse,
not...
this or trapping a bunch of giant spiders in a room and waiting for them to starve to death?
I'm gonna go almost anything in the Chivlo era as worse.
Yeah.
Cause
This at least panned out with the person being like, no, I am cool with it, actually.
Yeah,
The other is just murder.
Sure.
Yeah.
At the very least, this episode, for some reason, gives Ursula a positive mindset about the whole thing. Where I guarantee that after, like, a year at least, or at most, that mindset shifts to, oh god, this is agony.
Yeah, I mean, it's Love and Monsters. There is one small thing I do want to sort of give a shout out here to. There's the one line, I don't know why I find this so funny, but it's when they're asking what happened to I think it's to Bridget, and Victor's like, she's getting married. It'll never last. Stupid girl. And I'm like,
It was
that
Bliss.
that
was
line.
Bliss, yeah.
Oh, it's Bliss, is it? Yeah. That
Yeah.
line is so stupid and so weird. I have to laugh at it. I can't help myself. It made me laugh both times I'm watching it this week. It's so dumb and odd. And I get that it's meant to make, Victor Kennedy this really weird, awkward person, but I don't know. It got to me, I guess.
What's
That's the strength of Peter Kay's delivery.
Yeah.
That is also very true.
But also, like, the thought of, like, the Absol going, like, I've got to come up with a convincing lie that'll make them believe that Bliss is gone. I'm going to intentionally tell them that she's chosen something bad for herself. As opposed to, like, giving her a happy ending and letting them go, oh, okay, that's good for her. I guess we don't have to see her again if she's happy elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any... We've covered most of it.
Hadley, I feel
I
like...
covered all of my notes halfway through this, honestly.
Okay,
No, I
yeah.
was gonna say, I was wondering if you wanted to say any more of it on it, because it sounded like you had, obviously some strong feelings about it, but if you've gotten through them all.
Yeah, I think we've perfectly covered why this episode was shit. So
Fair enough.
Yeah, look, I mean, like I said, it's really tough because I think at a guttural level, I really want to like this episode. There's a part of me that is like, the Linda crew are really charming. It's a unique framing device for the show. I'm seeing the potential for the different kinds of stories that could have been told in this episode instead. But it's so all over the place tonally and story-wise. It's mean-spirited at times and not in a really fun way. And the ending, the last 5 minutes are just really nonsensical trash. So I don't know. Like we've reached the point in the episode where we would give this a score out of 10. I don't really know what I think at the moment, like in terms of a specific score. So if anyone else wants to go first, I'm happy to let them shout it out.
I have a question before I give a score. I'm not giving it a 0, but I just have to ask to establish a baseline. Are we giving out 0s?
We haven't yet, but I don't think there's anything stopping us from.
Yeah.
I'll give it a 2 then, because I like
2?
Electric Light Orchestra, and it wasn't total torture to watch. So
Okay.
Sure.
2 for Hadley.
I said earlier that like the general consensus of 6 seems fair, but just for my personal enjoyment, I would bump it up to a 7.
Okay. That'll help
Just because
get
like
the average up as well.
yeah, even some of the badder stuff, I feel like it's stuff that I can laugh at and be entertained by.
Well, that's fair. I mean, it's a similar way
And
that
then-
it's a similar reason that we all ranked The Chase really high, even though, like, from like a pure like story thing, it's kind of all over the map and not really consistent
Yeah.
either. But that is just so enjoyable that you can't feasibly give it anything lower than that.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I'm gonna go with a 5 for this one. Like you said, Cuff, I like a lot of the concepts here, but the whole thing is just, it's undercooked. It's nothing's really coming together all that well, and like I said, I can kind of admire some of the ambition of it, that they're doing something a bit different and trying to, marry all these disparate tones and concepts together, but it's just not... At the end of the day, it's just not coming together. And I don't know whether it's because RTD thought, oh, Doctor versus the Devil, that was a really serious story. We've got to have a fluff piece. We've got to, have something light for the audience, which is weird because it actually gets weirdly dark in places that don't seem to match. So, yeah, I'm going to say admirable, enjoyable in certain spots, but ultimately, yeah, I don't think I could give this much higher than a 5.
Yeah, I think I'm landing on a 5 as well. The stuff I like is pretty good and unique for the show. Linda are fun to watch just be Linda, but like it's so tonally inconsistent and all over the place with its plot, and occasionally has really, really icky and awful stuff, as demonstrated by a lot of what the past 5-10 minutes have been talking about with us. So yeah, that's about where I'm at as well, I think. So I was right. It was our most disparate review in terms of where we ranked stuff. This was by far the biggest gulf between highest and lowest scores. I guess with 4 people that's to be expected, but even when we had 3 of us here, we didn't go this
Because I
all
was
over the
going to
top.
say, a big divide between high and low scores, but that's from both of the guests. So if
That's
we just
true,
did
yeah.
You two as normal, it would have been 5 and 5.
That's true, yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, before I lead into next week's episode discussion, Sam, is there anything you'd like to plug here?
Oh, I mean, if I'd kept uploading Xenoblade, I would, but I haven't. So maybe I'll keep doing that one day.
Maybe. Hadley?
So I'm from Stale Bread. I do it with a good friend of ours, Jared. We used to be a gaming channel. At this point, we just review Goosebumps books. So once a month, we review 2 Goosebumps books, and then we talk about their respective TV adaptations, and we rank them all. And we reviewed one last week. I think I uploaded it, and we're up to 32 now, and we've got 30 to go. So check it out. I really like it.
Yeah, I do too. It's a very fun watch each month.
Yeah.
It's a glowing recommendation from Tuku's review.
One day we'll finish Bionicle Heroes.
It's not even like we don't want to. Someone just needs to like get off their ass and arrange it. Just like initiate the conversation.
All right. Well, next week on the podcast, all 4 of us will be back to talk about The 5 Doctors, the 20th anniversary special, and an episode which primarily features as many doctors as there are people in this podcast, despite the name of the episode. Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
I'm Sam.
And I'm Hadley.
There you go. And do either of you want to do a not very clever sign-off, like final line to leave the audience with?
If anyone out there at any point has ever thought that anything could happen in this world, just remember, we're all going to die eventually.
Uplifting.